The majority of the world would say that boredom is not fit to be part of the Super Bowl of feelings, but I don't think so. In my opinion, boredom can be as exciting as happiness, sadness, and anger. Yes, exciting. And yes, I'm still talking about boredom. Raise your hand if you know who J.R.R. Tolkien is. Plenty of you, right? In 1968, BBC have had an interview with him, and in the interview, he had said that one day he was grading his Harvard student semester tests when he came across a blank page which a student forgot to fill in. He stared at the blank page for several moments, not knowing what to do with it, when he immediately scribbled down those words on the blank page. In a hole in the ground, there lived the Hobbit. And yes, that is how the Hobbit was actually written. Here we can see that by the role of boredom, one of the most creative pieces of art were ever made, by a teacher simply staring at a blank page. Now we all go through different emotional states. We would have happiness, which would be some kind of satisfaction. We would have sadness, which would be a factor of happiness. We would also have anger, which would be frustration feelings towards something triggering. And then there is boredom. What is boredom? A lot of people try to define it and categorize it, but no one really came about and combined all the definitions into one big thing we can all agree upon. The simplest definition I could think of is that boredom is simply the lack of interest and the situations where the brain has nothing to focus about. And what happens when you get bored? We start daydreaming. And we do that simply to find something for us to focus on. But boredom is more than that. Boredom can also be understood as the situations where we have no stimulations. Stimulations are simple things which keep our brain busy. And unfortunately, our brain is very, very addicted to those stimulations. Also, these stimulations are very, very hard to seek for. And the brain has to be incredibly creative in order to receive those stimulations. But the brain is a very, very determined object, and it will do anything, no matter how creative and how much time it will take it, until it gets the stimulation. So until it gets the stimulation. For example, when I was a little kid and I was sitting in my house's living room, I can guarantee you that I was extremely bored. And I was just staring out the window. One daydream led to another, and one thought led to another, and I somehow managed to think about adults and charging phones. I thought about how adults are so concerned nowadays with charging their phones, and I said that I wanted to make this entire concept of charging much more enjoyable. So I researched what happiness was, and I figured out it was a chemical in the brain called dopamine. Then I said, what if we can insert electricity into those hormones and then insert the hormones into the mobile phone, and that way we can charge the mobile phone. I actually came up with an entire way to charge your phone by being happy. And anyway, it does not matter that it was absurd, and it doesn't matter that it was impossible. It matters that I was thinking. It matters that I was being creative. And it mainly matters that I was very, very bored to begin with, and in the beginning of the entire process. So let's go back a minute. I have said that boredom are the situations where we have no stimulations, and when we have no stimulations, our brain will be very, very creative until it finds a stimulation. Does that mean that boredom leads to creativity? And more than that, does that mean that if we would never get bored, we would never be creative? Well, believe it or not, but it is partly true. There are many, many researches made by the ANA, which is the American Neurological Association, and they have already proved many, many times that when we are bored, our creativity level is very, very high. But when we are not bored, our creativity level is very, very low, and is almost invisible to when we are bored if you would put it on a scale. So you know what else does that mean? It probably means that if we would never be bored, probably nothing would ever be invented. In order to get the invention or discovery, it has to go through a long chain of events, which starts from boredom. Invention would be a result of idea. An idea would be a result of thinking. Thinking would be a result of creativity, and we've all agreed that creativity would be a result of boredom. And without this base of boredom, you can't get to the top, which would be a discovery or invention. Imagine if our ancestors had iPhones 200,000 years ago. Then they would instantly check Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram, and then the fire would never be discovered, the knife would never be invented, nor civilization or clothing. That is because they would never have to be creative. And when you don't have to be creative, why would you be creative? Because it requires a lot of work, and it is hard to be creative sometimes. Fortunately, our ancestors did not have mobile phones 200,000 years ago, but we do. As 4.93 billion people in the world own a mobile phone these days. Next year, 2019, it is supposed to grow up to 5.07 billion people owning an iPhone. I think this is a catastrophe, because as long as humanity keeps on making those tools to keep us from being bored and to keep us more busy and busy, then we would become much less creative as a society, because we would have less chances and less people to be bored every time and every day and every day. So as long as science does not invent a way in which we can have two brains, one to be stimulated and one to be bored, then that's going to be very, very bad, because as a society, creativity will vanish from the world immediately. So it looks like any activity which includes your phone in it, for example, is not very stimulating. But what is stimulating? What can actually be a major part in being creative? It's not possible that just staring out the window can stimulate your brain. For example, memorizing the same sentence over and over again can be really, really impactful and can really help your brain develop into being more creative. That is because when we memorize the same sentence over and over again, in a matter of seconds or minutes, our brain will do it automatically, and then it will not consider it a stimulation anymore. Then it can just look for something else which will be more stimulating, because that is how our brain works. The same thing would be if we start sorting things in an algorithm, like sorting papers from A to Z. That is because, I hope, most of us do know the alphabet, and most of us do not need to think if X comes before or after E. That way, our brain will do it very quickly, automatically, and will not consider it a stimulation anymore. Therefore, it will look for new stimulations. Actually, there was a very long research made in Philadelphia where they took a group of people and divided them into two. The first group would go into a room, and then they were told to find as many as possible uses to a styrofoam cup as possible in a pretty limited time. An activity which really requires quite a lot of creativity. So they did it, and the timer set off, and they walked out the room with the results recorded. Immediately, the second group walked into the room, and then first, though, they were told to copy phone numbers from a phone book to a blank sheet of paper. They did it, and then the timer started. They had the same limited time to find as many as possible uses to a styrofoam cup as possible and as they can. They did it, and the timer set off, like the other group did, and the results were recorded. Not surprisingly, the second group did so much better. They found more than twice more possible uses to a styrofoam cup as the first one. That is because they did a boring activity before doing an activity which requires a lot of creativity. So this is a pretty decisive proof that boredom is actually one of the biggest factors of creativity. I'm going to give you 15 seconds of pleasure now, which I'm going to let you look at the sky, or the ceiling in this case, and enjoy those 15 seconds of being bored. I will start. Please start now, and I will stop when I will count. When I finish counting, I will stop you. Please start now. As I counted, it was around 15 seconds. And you know what? I can actually probably guess that some of you have felt like your fingers started itching. Some of you might have felt like this was a total waste of 15 seconds of your life. Some of you might have even felt a bit sick and nauseous. But I guarantee you that if you do it every day for 15 minutes and not 15 seconds, one day you will definitely do something big. Because thinking big is leading to doing something big. And I want you to remember what I said. I want you to remember, as long as you can, that boredom is not your enemy. Boredom is actually your biggest ally. And boredom is also responsible for anything that you see in this room. It is responsible for the conditions that a society is just going up as generations go. Please, fight for boredom to stay alive. Because if we keep on making those tools, and as we make our society be less tolerant to boredom as the generations go, boredom will one day vanish from the world, and that's not going to be things we want to see or we want to happen to our kids and their kids and their kids. And please remember, as John Kabat-Zinn said, When you pay attention to boredom, it gets unbelievably interesting. Thank you.